Imagine going to a shop, buying a book, and while you read the story, you analyze that the hero is a British and the other person who is portrayed as villain is represented as someone who is dark skinned, who lives in jungle and has no name and is called the native. Now, by analyzing this, the first question that must arise in your mind is who wrote the story? Who decided the factor that the hero's characteristics are this and the villain will be described like this? Who controls the story and whose stories get told? This is the entire engine of post-colonial theory. And today we are going to take a deep dive into the politically charged and emotionally alive theory of literary studies, which is post-colonial theory. Before that, you must understand that what is post-colonialism. Let's just start with a simple story. For roughly over 200 years, Britain ruled India, France ruled Algeria, Belgium ruled Congo. And what happened in that? They didn't just took the territory and the resources that the people had. They took the far more dangerous thing, that was the narrative. And what happens in that? People are left with nothing of their own. Now, how is that possible? Because the official history of British people says that we came, we civilized, and we improved. And they described the other people as someone, the natives, who are barbaric and who are in the constant need of guidance. Post colonial theory that questions that whose story is get told, who gets benefit from those, and what about the culture, literature, language that has not been told in that process, and what are the things that are not fully acknowledged during the colonial process. So this is post colonialism. Now, connected to this, we have certain key terms that needs to be understood in order to get the full mind map in our mind. So the first thing is orientalism. Now, imagine it like this way. Think of a Hollywood film and just imagine how the Middle East people are portrayed in that film. So you would see that there are representations of camels, deserts, mysterious men, veiled women, something like in which most of the natives could be represented and shown as inferior. At this point, Edward Said came into the frame with his landmark essay Orientalism in 1978. Said argued that West, in which the people of America and Europe, they created an imaginary and visionary vision of persons whom they called natives and what he called Orient. Now, the Orient which they described was someone who was exotic, backward, dangerous, and far more importantly, inferior. That is what they describe that Orients are. Now, it was all the thing of knowledge, because knowledge is power. They tried to portray a opposite figure which is lesser than them. They tried to portray this thing as in the most of the politically, in paintings, in literature, so they can justify ruling over them. And this is the power, and this is how knowledge is represented. So the key term which we can analyze from this is that knowledge is power and representations are never innocent. Connected to this is our next concept, which is the other. Now just imagine that there is someone who says that we are civilized. Now what does it mean when say that they are civilized? That there is someone out there to whom they can point to and say that they are not civilized. Now this is the same theory which colonizers applied to the colonized. They came and told that we are civilized and tried to make other people feel inferior by portraying them as something like that. They created the othering concept in which they constructed a lesser and opposite figure to whom they can point to and say that they are not up to the mark and we are up to the mark. This is the concept of othering which the colonizers approved and portrayed. The concept of othering can also be seen in the Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. In that, Conrad portrayed Africans with no voice, no name, no identity. And then Chinua Achebe came into the frame. and he tried to portray the Africans with the name, and he tried to show that how Conrad produced an a thing in which African was just the background of white people's psychological and philosophical mind's journey. And Chino Achebe called this out. However, this term of writing it back, this is itself a post-colonial act, which I will conclude in the concluding part. Now, here comes the most fascinating part and little tragic. The colonizers didn't come and just ruled through armies and wars. They tried to rule through discourse, through language, through education, through institution. For example, in India, Lord Macaulay's 1835 minute, it explained the main goal of Britishers or the colonizers was to create Indians who are Indians in blood and color, but English in taste, in order, in morals, and in intellect. This was their main aim. And here comes Homi Bhabha in picture, who called all these things as mimicry. Now the colonizers wanted the colonized to imitate them, but they didn't want them to imitate completely. Like, if they will imitate them completely, they will be the equal. But colonizers didn't want the colonized to be equal. They want something who tries to copy them, to imitate them, but not exactly like them. Something like almost the same, but quite different. That is what they wanted to create. And the difference between the imitators and the colonizers, the difference between them, it created ambivalence. The process where the uh, colonizers wants to just resist them but also wants to be like them. This is the state. And the most important and fascinating things that happens here is the hybrid culture, where the colonized people are neither fully colonized like the colonizers, neither they are fully accepted, nor they remain in their original state. This is the process of hybrid, because when colonizers and colonized try to emerge together or try to copy the colonized people try to copy them, there comes a state where the hybridity takes place, where the colonized people are neither fully colonized like the colonizers, and they are not the people who they started from the childhood. But Homike Bhabha says that this is not weakness. Hybridity is not weakness. It is a resistance which dismantles the belief of colonizers, that colonizers about their cultural purity. The next concept is subaltern, which was given by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, and in his essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? Now, what does it do? Before that, you must know that what does it mean to be called subaltern. So, when we are talking about that the voice of colonized people must be heard, we are talking about which people, which group, because in India itself there are hierarchies, there are caste. In India itself, being colonized, there were these theory, the hierarchies were there. Now the people who are in the upper state, they can afford going outside, they can afford going out Oxford, and they can come and write back as the post-colonial act against the colonialism. But what about the person, specifically the women who are at the margin of the society, who is doubly oppressed, doubly colonized, one by the British people and the other by the Indian societies. For example, here G.C. Spivak talks about the sati process, where the Britishers tries the saving her narrative, and the Indian society says that it is her choice narrative. In the both the process, no one asks that what is the choice of the women who is doing it. It was all about that there was no system to willing to hear her. That was the problem. So the conclusive part which Jesus Spivak says that subaltern cannot speak because they are doubly colonized. The thing is, in the whole process, what do colonized do? The answer is they write back. The essay by Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffins, The Empire Writes Back, it tells about all this thing. The biggest thing is to write back against, not against, but the version of what colonizers are telling. We just need to write back to them. This is what colonized people do. For example, Jean Reyes wrote White Sargasso Sea just to portray Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre perspective. How in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, there is a woman who is been portrayed in attic, mad, nameless. But Jean Reyes gives her a name and Toine a history, a voice, someone to hear it. This act of writing back is the post-colonial act. The first draft of official history was written by colonized people, and after that what we writes or what has been written against these things to show our perspective as well, this is the post colonial act, and it is still going on and on. That is post colonial theory, and that's it for today. See you soon in the next video, and the notes will be attached in the end of the video.